not much of a woodworker. This kind of stuff is a little bit more up my alley. But last year, I decided I wanted to try a woodworking project, and I built a balcony table out of scrap wood I had lying around, and honestly, it turned out pretty good. So I think I'm going to try it again. This time, I'm using wood that I bought brand new, spent money on this stuff, not scrap wood, and I'm going to make a coffee table. It's going to be a complement to the balcony table. What could possibly go wrong, right? Okay, so the first thing I did was sit down at the computer and design what the coffee table is going to look like in an open source program called Blender. It's used for animation, but it's also really good for 3D modeling, and being in the computer industry, it was a bit of a natural for me to put it together in my head and then put it together in Blender. That also gave me a good idea of the materials that I needed. Now, because I'm doing proper woodworking, proper for me, sure, I'm going to use tenon and mortise joints like I did with the coffee table to make it as strong as possible. The downside is, in my design, I have 16 of the buggers I've got to make. So last year I did the tenons on my table saw. It was a bit of a grind. It worked out great, but it was really, really tedious, and I haven't got the best fancy table saw. So for this project, I'm actually going to use my router. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos to figure out how that's going to work, and I think I got it figured out. I'm going to make a couple of jigs for the little router that I bought last year. It's a cool little router, really powerful. It works great for these light woodworking projects that I'm probably going to keep doing. If you want to check it out, I've got a link in the description to all this stuff. Anyways, these 2x2s are going to be the legs and the frame, so I need to do tenon cuts on the end, so I'm going to start making that jig now. Alright, so according to my design, I need 12 lengths of 2x2, 4 57 inches long, 4 18 inches long, and 4 13 inches long. It's actually 1.5 by 1.5, but who's counting, right?
A little later.
Okay, I've got 4 of each cut. 57, 18, and 13 inches long. Why are they stacked like this? I don't know. It looked logical. Not the way they're going to be assembled anyways. And I've got some little bits and pieces left over that I'm going to use to make the jigs to cut the tenons and to cut the mortises with my router. So I'm going to start putting these together now. Okay, so here's my plan. Pretend this is the end piece that I need to put a tenon on. I'm going to have another piece of hardboard across these two and lined up so that when these two ends are on the end of the work that needs to have the tenon made, the edge of the router will run along the edge of the board that's there. As long as I've got these 3 ends lined up, I can't cut farther back than 3/4 inch. And of course, it's going to be a 1/4 inch depth. Rotate it, do it again, rotate it, do it again. Okay, I've made my first jig. The jig is up! So the idea is that I take the end of the piece of wood that I want to cut the tenons on, and I slide it in, and I line up the ends like that, and then I take a clamp, like that, and I can clamp it together. That holds, clamp it together a little harder. That then holds it in place, and I run my router along this edge here, and it's going to notch out this section here. This little piece I've cut, I've used as a template. I'm going to test on this. Fingers crossed. I've got the router depth set to 1/4 inch, because this would be the long side of the tenon. I've got the workpiece clamped down in the most ratchet way possible. So let's give this a try and see if this works. It looks pretty good. And this, other than the raggedies here, which I can shave off with a sharp knife. So now I'm going to bump the router down another 1/4 inch, just a little more, 3/8 inch, and then finish this. I'll flip the workpiece over and try the other side. I think that's the best tenon I've ever made, except for one little screw up. I just flipped over my jig I completely forgot about that. I hadn't actually lined up the bottom part to be precise enough, and it actually cut a little deeper. That's why I just wrote this little reminder. Okay, this is going to work a treat. I am going to start making my tenons. I'm not going to record that because I've got 16 of these buggers to make. I will also make sure that my workpiece is clamped down even more than it was because it was wobbling over the place, but this is just a short little test piece. So I'm going to get to that. Once I'm done that, I'm going to flip things around and then I'm going to make a jig for the mortise part of this process. Back in a few minutes. So before I actually start making these tenons, I'm going to go to each piece and I'm going to mark the end in an orientation that the tenon is going to be. Otherwise, my ADHD is going to get me distracted. Squirrel! And I'll end up having one that's one way and one that's the other way.
2 hours later.
Okay, I have all the tenons cut on the horizontal pieces that make up the table, and the next thing I need to do now is start cutting mortises on the table legs. These are the vertical parts, so there will be a top bar coming in here with a tenon, and there'll be another bottom bar coming in about here with a tenon, and on the other side will be the 90-degree. Anyways, I've got a jig in mind that I'm going to make sure those tenons for these things are cut precisely, and I'm going to do that now. All right, this is what I'm thinking. This is the table leg here in the middle. And I've got 2 scrap pieces of 2x2 on either side and an end stop here that's actually going to hold it together. Because my router is exactly 3 inches across and the center of the bit is 1 3/4 inches, that makes it real easy to just fall right into the center. So I'm going to screw a stop in here. I'm going to anchor these together. I'm going to screw a stop in here at the appropriate distance so that the bit sinks in 1/4 inch below the top of the leg. And then 3/4 of an inch later, the other stop will be there. So I just have to plunge the router in, move it 3/4 of an inch. It'll hit the stops on either end. I will have guides on either side, and then I'll do the same thing around about here. I want to have the bottom 2x2 about 4 inches up off the floor when the table is standing upright. All right, I'm going to put this together now and see what happens. The end cap, I've just drilled and sunk a couple of screws in there. They're going to screw right into the top end of here with a little bit of glue. Doesn't have to be strong, and it doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to hold it all together. Okay, I've got my start block and stop block pretty much positioned where I want them. Got this scrap piece of table leg that I'm going to put in and give it a try. You see, I've got it's tiny bit off to one side. I suspect that this is going to be this side. Might be too far this way. I might just pad this a little bit. I've already glued this, so it's kind of permanent now, so I might just put a tiny, like a piece of paper or something there to push it over a bit, but it's also not quite deep enough. I might have to sand a bit off the end. Redneck carpentry. I'm going to let this all set up, and then I'll work on this end down here for the lower horizontal supports. It's starting to get a little dark now, so I'm going to continue this tomorrow.
3 days later.
I was almost ready to throw in the towel. This thing nearly defeated me. I could not get the router bit to travel in a straight line or center of the leg that I was trying to cut the mortise in. It was either slightly to the left or slightly to the right, and no matter what I did, I even tried gluing in popsicle sticks in here to like shim things left and right, and it just would not work. And I thought, maybe I'd just go back to the old way of using the router guide, and where's the fun in that, right? Yeah, I could have gone online and spent some money on a proper router jig for this, but I like to try and figure stuff out myself. Could have watched some YouTube videos and made a proper, more flexible router jig than what I had in mind. But honestly, like I said, try to figure things out myself. So feeling like I didn't even have enough brain cells to rub together to start a campfire, I was getting pretty despondent on figuring this thing out. And then suddenly, an idea. I thought to myself, Self, you've got 3D printers. And Self, you know how to model in 3D. Why not print a jig? And that is exactly what I did. So using primitive shapes in Blender, I modeled up a jig that is going to fit the piece of wood perfectly. The router travels through the slot. It can only travel 1 inch, which is the distance that I need to make the mortise. Piece of wood fits in like that, and you can see how tight a fit that is. The router is just going to sit in there in the base. It can't go left or right. It can only go up and down, and I have to cut that mortise out. So I'm pretty excited about the potential for this. And this is the jig that I made for the lower section of the legs. You can see this fits in here. The router is going to cut the mortise in here. There's a bit of a gap between the bottom and where it is because the crossbar comes in like that. And it turned out really good. I'm getting really good at jigs. Okay, I am going to try a test run. So it works much better. You can see it's almost perfectly lined up here. I'm not too worried about that tiny little bit. This is about a 30/32 of an inch. Also, some of this wood I found is about a 1/16 or more thicker on one side, so deal with that in the post-processing. What does that mean? It means I'll probably sand it down. I'm going to run with it. I'm going to do a bunch of mortises now. One last thing I thought I'd do before I start cutting all these mortises is just line the jig with some technical tape, and that just makes it a little slipperier for the router to move on and may protect the PLA, which is the material I use to print this with. I've taken a moment to decide which of the 4 legs are going to be front, rear, just based on blemishes, and want to make sure I got the pretty side out. These are going to be the 2 front legs. I've got that defect there, that one there. These are going to be inside, so these are going to be the fronts. These are going to be the rear legs. I will actually be routing the inside of these. You'll see that a little later in the video, the way I do the panels for the sides. And I'm going to mark them with tape, and I'm going to draw the spots where I'm cutting the tenons so I don't get distracted and really screw this up. All these stickers are forward facing, so when this is the back leg, it's going to be like that, and the table's going to be here. Now for the serious stuff. I bought a brand new router bit for this. It's a 2-flute design, which is a lot better at clearing out the chips. Word of warning, those flutes are very sharp. Let the chips fly. All the mortises are cut. All 16 of them. Does that make me a mortician? I'm covered in sawdust, aren't I? Alright, these are the long pieces for the table. As you can tell, I've marked them and oriented them with lines here because I'm going to route a notch out there, and you'll see why. Now I'm just going to round off the edges of these tenons. It looks like a decent fit. Got all the tenons nicely shaped and fitting pretty good. So now I can start assembling the front and rear frames of this table. Time to get gluing. I bought these pretty kick-butt corner clamps that I'm going to use to assemble the frames, and it's going to help keep everything nice and square and held tightly together while the glue dries. I'm going to do it on the floor of my temporary work shelter, because it's one of the only smooth, cleanish, horizontal surfaces I have to glue this stuff together. But I'm working on that and building another workshop. Alright, this is how I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to use the corner clamps on the top to make sure everything is square, glue up all the tenon and mortises through the other frame, lay it right on top of this, and then I'm going to use this ratchet strap to pull the legs in for the lower crossbars. And I think this should work fine, and I'll just let it dry overnight. Alright, I've got this all strapped and clamped up. I'm going to let it dry overnight, and then the front and the back frames for the table are done. And then after that, I need to do some routing on the inside of these frames, because I want to insert the side panels and the front panels and the back panels into the actual frame itself. So there's only a 1/2 inch depth, but you might have seen that on my Blender design. But I'm going to clean up, put it away for the night, and get back to it again tomorrow.
The next day.
Okay, so it's been almost 24 hours now. This has been sitting here. The glue should be dried. And now it's time to take it all apart, see if the glue's stuck, and then start working on the sides, which is exciting because then this thing is going to start looking like something soon. Well, they didn't stick together. That's a bonus. Oh yeah, these are sturdy. So my joinery or whatever it's called is probably not at the professional level. So I do have some minor gaps here. I'm going to cheat and use some wood filler. No one's ever going to know. So this is the paneling I plan on using for the sides. It's got that nice little groove down the center, which is going to align nicely with the tabletop that I'm going to make for it. But what I need to do is, this is the inside of the back of the frame. I need to route notches so that this will sit in there. I think that'll look really nice. So I've got to set up my router. I've got to get a bit on there, and I have to route these notches out for the back, the left, the right, the front, and the bottom as well, which is just going to be a regular piece of shelving that I bought for the top. So I'm going to get the router set up and start doing that now. Okay, I've got a piece of scrap 2x2 clamped in there to allow the router to run along the edge of the table's 2x2. I've got my 1-inch square tubing acting as a guide for the router, and I got my 3/8 router bit set up. I'm going to go down to 3/4 inches all the way. I'm going to make it in 3 passes, a 1/4 inch at a time. The top and the bottom inside only need to be 3/8, just enough to capture the paneling. This side has to be 3/4. I'll explain that to you a little bit later as to why I'm doing it that way. And I'm going to route from about here all the way along to about the same spot on the other side. And I have to do it here, here, and on that frame over there too. So let's get routing. Well, that looks pretty good, and it is 3/4 inch deep. Getting close to the majority of the routing done now. I've got the insets all done. I have to run a 3/4 inch deep by 3/4 inch tall cut on the bottom, and that's for the bottom of the table to insert up into. So I'm going to do this one now. Oh, and I'm not going to have the router bit go much past that point there because I want a sharp corner on this leg. I will notch the table bottom to fit around the legs. That's one of 2 done. I'm going to do the other one, and then I'm going to start putting in this panel. Finally feel like some progress is being made. Alright, I got the big stuff routed out. I'm going to put some panels in here now because I want to see some sides on this thing today. I need to cut this at a 45 along here, and the same way over here. And then there's another piece that's going to fill this gap here. I'm also going to rip off the groove on the bottom end here. Alright, let's give this a test fit. Now that I've cut it what I think is the right length. Oh yeah, look at that. Perfect. And that's kind of what it's going to look like on that side. Okay, got to cut 4 of these. Okay, I've got the tongue and groove paneling cut. Now the thing is, I need to take a little bit off the top and off the bottom, because the insert is 11 3/4, but the tongue and groove is 13. So I have to cut 1 1/4 inch split between top and bottom. I'll do that now. I'm going to use my belt sander to just quickly round off the top corners of these pieces, and if I've measured everything right, this should just drop right into the frame. Alright, time for a test fit. Do that with a chisel. Maybe. Alright. Hey, look at that. And on the flip side, that's what the panel's going to look like. Oh yeah. That's pretty sweet. All right, now you can kind of see my vision of what I've got in mind for this table, and it's starting to really come together. I'm really happy with it. I'm gonna, off camera, glue this all up, staple it down. All I'm doing is putting these panels into the frames, and I'm gonna let them dry overnight and then start tackling the side panels. That's gonna make it look like an actual table. That's very exciting. And it'll be another day, just like I did get all the parts and pieces glued together. Let it sit overnight. What's going on with this stuff? Nothing. These are just cross pieces that for the side of the table, which I've already just gone ahead and routed those, and I rounded off the tenons, and it's getting cloudy. I'm a little bit concerned that there might be some weather coming in, so I'm going to hop to it, get these sides put together, get it all glued, clamped up, and then let the table sit before the rains come. I'll move it inside, hopefully before that happens. So I'm going to get to it. Okay, I need to just get the legs. Those aren't legs. I need to get the crossbars, top, bottom, whatever you want to call them, in place. And then make my measurements for the actual side pieces that are going to go across. And then cut those on the radial arm saw. And get it all glued and clamped and all that fun stuff. Now this is where having 3 arms would really be helpful. Kind of hoping that friction's going to hold it together. And we know what happened last time I tried that. So definitely need to be wider than that. They're a tiny bit too long because I have gaps. All right, I have moved this indoors into my little temporary tent shelter because it's getting dark and I think there's rain coming. So time to get serious. I am going to slather this in glue and I'm going to assemble it and then flip it on its top and clamp everything together and hope for the best. Decided a paintbrush would be a better way to go than a Q-tip. Oops, sorry, no brand names. Then a cotton swab. Give this a good degluing once I get it set up. Wow. Okay, now to flip it on its back, on its top. Well, flip it upside down anyways. Knowing what happened last time, let's not make that mistake again. And start clamping stuff up. It's so close now. It didn't quite go together like an IKEA table, but didn't come in a flat pack either. And it's literally the only one of its kind in the world. Maybe even in the galaxy. All right, I'm gonna leave this overnight, let it set up. And tomorrow, I'm just gonna put the bottom in, which is just a flat board that I just have to notch the corners out of. I got a bit of cleanup I know I need to do. I'm gonna wipe off the glue, but I'm just gonna turn off the camera for that and then see what tomorrow brings. Okay, this thing is sat overnight and the glue has all dried. Let's unwrap it from the clamps and see what it looks like. Oh yeah, that's pretty sweet. Pretty strong too. Okay, I've dragged her out into the daylight and she still looks pretty good. I got a little bit of glue here and there to clean up and I'm going to do a bit of sanding just to get rid of some of the scuff marks off of her. Looks a bit like a planter, not quite like a table, but when I put the tabletop on, it'll look like this. And that's going to hinge open. All right, I'm going to do a little cleanup. Then I can start staining and varnishing and dealing with the lid. Before I got too carried away, I realized I should probably put a bottom on this thing. So I have another panel board for that, and I'm going to just cut it to the right width and length and notch out the corners, glue and staple it in. So that's 13 inches by 56 7/8. All right, now that I've got the board cut to size, the next thing I need to do is just notch out the 4 corners so they fit around the legs. All right, let's just fit this and see how badly I screwed up. Oh, wow. Absolutely perfect. First time. All right, I'm going to pop this back out, lay a bead of glue down there, staple the bottom in. Well, the table base is done. All I'm going to do now is just kiss a few areas with my sander to brighten the wood up a little bit where it's scuffed, like right here, and then get some stain on it in preparation of varnishing it. This thing is getting close to being finished now, and I'm very happy about that. Okay, the stain is done. Only thing left to do really is for this coat to dry, and I'm going to flip it over, just do the underbelly. I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm going to move this inside the shelter again because, well, the rains did hold off yesterday. Might not be so lucky today. So I'm going to do that, and then tomorrow will be the first coat of varnish.
The next day.
And the stain has dried nicely, and it's time to start putting some varnish on this thing. I'm going to start off just by doing the underside and the legs, and I'm going to let that dry, throw another coat on there, flip it right side up, and then do the sides and the inside. And once that's dried, it's done. Well, except for the lid. I'll have to do that as well. All right, I'm going to let this coat dry, and once it does, I'll slap on a second coat. I'm not going to record that, and I'll flip it over and do the rest. Well, that first coat is looking pretty sweet. I'm going to let this dry, and it is getting late, so I'm going to move it inside once it's dry enough for me to move around, so a few hours from now, and then give it the second coat tomorrow. Again, I'm not going to record that one because it's just more of the same, and then I can start working on the lid for this thing, and that should take me no time at all. Famous last words, right? See you tomorrow. The varnishing is done. So this is a piece of 5 foot by 16 inch by 3/4 inch project board. It's just laminated pine, and I'm going to use this for the lid for this table. So I can't use planks like I used for the bar table because there's going to be storage under the lid of this table, and it needs to be watertight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my router, and I'm going to use it just to cut fake planks using a router bit. This is the pointiest router bit that I have. It's not super pointy. And you can just see the tiniest bit sticking up here. I'm just going to use the tip. Hey-o! And it's going to create more of a line than a V, but that's okay because it's going to work for my needs. Time to get routing. Well, I have everything set up ready to go because the style that I did for the bar table had, 2 planks on it on the end. I'm going to route these ones first. I'm using some square tubing I have lying around because, as I've said in the past, I am a little bit more comfortable working with metal. So I have this lying around. It's going to be my straight edge. And I'm going to guide the router along that and cut out the first groove. This is going to go either really good or I'm about to make a $40 mistake. Hey, not too bad. All right, I'm going to set up and to the other end over there. And then I'm going to mark every 4 inches. And then using this long ass bar as a guide, I'm going to notch what's going to look like planks that way. I'm going to do that now and show you the results. Okay, this actually turned out a little bit better than I expected. The grooves are a little bit deeper than I thought they would be, which is actually good because that's going to work with the paneling put on the sides. I think it will match really nicely. Using that guide and taking my time, made some very nice straight cuts, and I was able to stop in time where the crossboard would be so as to not nick the sides, and I'm pretty happy with the result. I'm going to stain this thing now and then let that dry and start varnishing. I think it's going to be turning out pretty good. I'm really happy about this. Wait a minute. I want this thing to be weather resistant. So if it rains, water could run down the edge of the board and along underneath. Nobody wants wet stuff in storage. I'm going to route a drip rail around the underside of the lid that'll prevent water from doing exactly that. Well, that worked well. So you can see all around the perimeter of the tabletop, this is the bottom, I have this rail now, this drip rail or edge or whatever. So if water comes over the top and down, it can't climb up that and get back underneath. I think this will work well. Now I can get on to staining and varnishing the lid. All right, the stain has dried. There's been enough time for the top and the bottom to dry, and I'm going to paint it with the same spar varnish that I used on the original balcony table. No, I mean literally the same spar varnish. This is the original can I used last year. So if you want to watch varnish dry, stick around. I'm just kidding. I will speed this up. The lid is complete. But the joy was short-lived because it dawned on me I hadn't put much thought into how I'm going to put one on top of the other and make it stick. So the completion of this project hinges on one thing, the hinges. So yeah, I went out and bought a couple of brass hinges from the hardware store. And while they're pretty small, they still have about, I don't know, I guess a 1/4 inch thickness. So, whoops. It's a good thing that's tough varnish. So, they're going to sit here like this, and it's a little bit proud on top of the edge of the table, the inside of the table. So I am actually going to mark it out, and I'm going to use my chisels to make a recess in the wood. So at least the bottom part of the hinge is going to be recessed into the table base a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit lower profile. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to inset each hinge about 1 foot from the edge. Is there any magic number for that? No, just pulling it out of there'll be one here, there'll be one on there. Should be plenty strong. I mean, it's just a pretty light plank, so it'll open up, it'll support the weight. I've got a couple of other things I'm going to put on the side. I'm going to save that surprise until after I get the hinges on. I hope I don't screw this up because I don't have to revarnish everything. So I'm using a knife because I need to cut that with a chisel. I'm just using the biggest chisel I have because it's make the longest, straightest line possible. This is not nerve-wracking at all. Okay. Just shave off the top. Try to keep my chisel. Oh, that was, whew. That was a little scary. Cross the grain, is that the right way to do it? I would love to hear in the comments from people who actually are woodworkers or have more experience than I do. I am going to go with that. Pretty sweet. Could have drilled pilot holes for these screws, but the wood is soft enough that I'm not worried about it splitting. Hinge number 2. Now the fun part, getting the lid on there and make sure it's square and aligned. I think it would be easiest if I put the lid on, got it squared up on the table, and then mark the back of the hinges, and then flip things upside down and screw them in together. I think that makes sense. Let's give it a try. Yeah, I don't think this is weird at all. So I have the base of the table upside down and the lid right side up. And I am going to screw the screws in from down below. Screwing things up because I'm screwing things down. Anyways, I got to do it from below. Okay, I think I have the gap lined up properly. Eyeballing it down the length of the table lid. And I'm just going to get... This doesn't feel right. This is wrong because the screw should be going in a little farther over here, which means the table will never be open this wide. I mean the table lid. So I need to figure out a better way of setting this up. I'll be right back. All right, I've come up with a solution. I've got 2 long clamps underneath one side to the other. And they are clamping just a bit of scrap wood right at the level that I need the back of the lid to rest on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lid, rest it vertically on these 2 supports, and then while holding it up with one hand, I can screw the screws in with another. And that should get it installed. I swear doing all this stuff solo comes with its own extra set of challenges. 3 hands would be nice right now. Not the AI generated kind. I'll use my face as a support. Why not? Okay, I'm going to get one in on the other side. Those supports give me a little bit of balance, as long as it doesn't fall off the support. Now here is a good test. That looks aligned nicely. Okay, I'll get the rest of these in. My dad told me if you hold your tongue right, it goes a lot easier. Okay, hinges are on. And so you can see the risk here when the lid opens is that it could lever against the hinges and actually rip the hinge right out because it could just flop right over. But I have a secret weapon against that. Gas struts. These are going to help keep the lid both closed and opened and not allowing the lid to overextend and possibly tear the hinges out. So the last thing I need to do now is put these things in. I've got the installation notes right there, and I'm going to do the left side first. That way I don't have to worry about the camera. This round hinge or round ball socket has to be 255 milliliters. Wow. 255 millimeters from where the other part mounts. So that's going to be right there. And the little ball has to be about 10 millimeters from the top. So the 90 is 78. So that's about the center there. I think because that is quite close to the edge, I will drill a pilot hole in there so the wood won't split. Okay, that's on. And all this cartridge will sit here. And then the other ball will be around. Yeah, I think that'll do well. Gas canister on here and see what it does. Hey, look at that. Ooh, I think it'll actually close. Alright, gonna do the other one. It's done. And it works. Oh, I'm so happy. That was a lot of work. But boy, am I happy with the results. I think without a doubt, this was the hardest woodworking project I have ever taken on. I learned a lot, I screwed up a lot, I got frustrated a lot, and came that close to not finishing it. But in the end, it turned out pretty good. I know a lot of the stuff I did, I just figured out myself, and that's kind of the way I like to do things. Keeps the old noodle sharp. Could have looked up a lot of different stuff on the internet or even downloaded plans, but I wanted to do this thing start to finish all by myself. Well, if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Good for you. I think this is a long one. If you want to help me out, you can like this video, leave comments for me. I'd love to see them. I will respond to them. I may not get to them right away, but I will respond to them. And if you haven't subscribed, why not go ahead and do that? Also, I've got a Ko-fi account now and merch. If you want to help the channel out, you can check that stuff out. I've got links to that, as well as the Ko-fi account in the description, as well as some of the tools that I use to make this table with. Maybe you're interested in some of those yourself. You can have a look, click on the link. They're affiliate links. They won't cost you any more, but they may help me out a little bit. Throw me a few bucks here and there. Anyways, like I said, if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. You're a champ. I really appreciate it. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully it's not as hard as this one. Yeah, it looks pretty good there. Oh look, there's its companion I made a year ago.